look at this photograph. Welcome to the EMS Wizard Podcast. And today we've got an extra special guest. We've got one of the founding partners, founding members of the premier law firm, Page, Wolfberg Wirth. We've got Steve Wirth with us today. Steve, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Terence and John. Great to be with you all this morning or this afternoon, whatever it may be.
Yeah, you're also the co-founder of the PWW Advisory Group as well, which I think is a national consulting firm.
Right. Yeah, we do national consulting, and we started that venture a few years ago, and it's been taking off because, as you know, a lot of changes are happening in EMS these days.
100%. Been talking about those changes for a while. A lot of that coming soon to a theater near you type stuff, and now we're seeing that stuff come to fruition. So it's been, exciting. I think exciting is a word I see a lot of folks use in social media, but I would also say potentially challenging, especially in the managerial world.
For sure.
Just to get us started, we like to bring our guests on, and I always talk about people's journey. We have a lot of folks that listen to, us based off maybe their personal journey in management or leadership, maybe their future journey or something like that, or something they've had in the past. So I'll just lead off with, could you share maybe what your journey's been like, to get to where you are, being a attorney, national speaker, and all the things that you've become. But tell us a little bit about your journey.
Sure. Well, it's great. My journey started as a paper boy. Do you all know what a paper boy is?
On a bike?
Or a paper girl?
It's funny because I think John and I were paper boys back in the day too. So we might be the dying generation of people that remember that, delivering things to houses.
You got that right. They don't do that anymore. But I was a paper boy for the Miami Herald. We lived in Vero Beach, Florida. And I was 12 years old, and my best friend David Thompson and I were paper boys. And the guy who was in charge of the Miami Herald district office there was a guy by the name of Phil Long. He was also a volunteer firefighter for the Vero Beach Volunteer Fire Department. And that got me and my buddy all enamored with firefighting and firefighters. And he'd come in and he'd be wearing this white coverall thing, and then he offered to take us down to the station. And we went down to the fire station and were introduced to a wonderful gentleman by the name of Captain Harwell Grice. He took me and my friend David into the firehouse, toured us around. We were treated like adults. Now, mind you, we're 12-year-old kids, and this fire captain and all the firefighters in there are talking to us as equals, making us feel really, really important. And in fact, they even gave us membership cards as honorary members of the Vero Beach Volunteer Fire Department. And that just set me off. And I was like, wow, I want to be a firefighter when I grow up. And it took off from there. A couple years later, of course, the show Emergency came out, and I became a junior firefighter in Pennsylvania at the age of 15 and an EMT at age 16. But I tell the story about my days in Vero Beach way back when because it goes to show you that you never know what kind of influence you're going to have on a young person. When those firefighters and that fire captain, Harwell Grice, treated me and my best friend as equals, as adults, listened to us, was interested in us, paid attention to us, that really said something. And to me, I tell firefighters and paramedics all around the country, I say, don't ever underestimate the impact you have on young people coming in for a tour or talking to them at a school or wherever it might be, because people look up to us. We're sort of their heroes, and that can have a huge impact on bringing in the new generation into EMS and the fire service. So age 16, I was an EMT, got selected to be a paramedic at age, I guess I was 20. Okay, I was the youngest in the first paramedic class at Williamsport Hospital in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Spent a few years there on the street as a medic, serving the largest geographic county in Pennsylvania, and then got promoted to paramedic instructor, became assistant director of the training program there, and then went to Erie, Pennsylvania to help set up emergency care, an EMS system that had fallen apart in the early 1980s and was reconstructed by the city in the 4 area hospitals there. And I did that for about 9 years before somebody, a mentor, someone who I listened to and had interest in my life and my career said to me, Steve, why don't you go to law school? So you might be a good lawyer. So a couple of people had said that to me. So I ended up going to law school later in life. And then, of course, having the EMS background and connections around the state and also around the country, had met Jim Page. My boss at the time was a good friend of Jim Page. His name was Earl Gettinger. He was the CEO of Emerging Care up in Erie, and introduced me to Jim. And again, I was sort of like mesmerized by Jim Page and the impact that he had on EMS. And, from there, that's where, we knew EMS and got a lot of calls from people who said, you guys are lawyers now. Doug and I got together with Jim, started the firm, and people started coming to us because we knew the industry. They were tired of talking to lawyers who didn't even know the difference between an EMT and a paramedic. So that's kind of how it all took off.
So to me, that sounds like that pedigree piece where we talk about sometimes, hey, if you're going to deal with a law firm, you're going to deal with somebody on something or another. They should be a subject matter expert. But I think my question for you is, we talked a little bit about this before. I get to start to stutter a little bit because I'm so excited about it. And I had picked the brain of your partner, Doug, one time about Jim Page. First chief in the state of North Carolina. You touched on emergency, really just shaped that landscape, and awards after him. And so, tell us a little bit about Jim Page, some of the impacts you think he made on the industry, how that continues today, and really just the amazing person. It's just a guilty pleasure of mine that this is somebody that you had the privilege of working with. So just tell us a little bit about that.
Oh my goodness, quite a human being. I tell you, he really was the change agent for EMS, and really, a founding father of modern day EMS. And the neat thing about him was he didn't hesitate to question the traditions and the things that we had been doing that maybe aren't so good. And he was one to get in there and change everything, so to speak. But he did it from the focus of the patient, and everything that he talked about in EMS system design and how EMS should provide care to patients, all focused on what are we doing for the patient. And that was so neat. And of course, he was the technical advisor to the TV show Emergency when he was LA County Battalion Fire Chief. So he brought that perspective to it. And I think that show, as we know, probably did more to change and create, modern day EMS in the eyes of the public today than anything, that we've seen come along in 50 years or so. So, just an amazing guy, amazing role model. And of course, had a way of getting the word out. Tremendous writer, tremendous speaker. And I think that set the stage for a lot of us, getting into EMS leadership because we wanted to be like Jim Page.
You said a couple of words that I want to come back to. One thing you said in your intro there is that you got selected to paramedic school. Was there a process? Could you not be selected?
Well, back in those days, it was a big deal. There were several hundred applicants for the 12 spots in the paramedic class in 1979 at Williamsport Hospital. That's, because that's coming on the heels of the show Emergency. So you had a lot of interest from the young people because young people, my age are watching this and wanted to be involved as firefighters, paramedics, EMTs. So it was, I think, I don't know, more interest in it then than today, maybe, perhaps. And that's probably another road we can go down.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we had a little, the 9/11 spurt, what I think caused a lot of people wanting to get in at that point in time. And that's been a good, going on, over 25 years ago and getting there. The other word that you mentioned, though, I think is the thing that recruits people now, as you talked about. I don't think you used the word impact, but it's what you described them, that firefighter captain that was, he had an impact on you. And
absolutely.
I think he probably had an intentional impact. And we spend a lot of time sometimes in our programs talking about the unintentional impact you have on people. They watch you. That's right. As an EMS officer, they're watching you all the time to see what especially if you're having a positive influence on somebody, they're watching everything you do, kind of like the like Mike syndrome. Michael Jordan, every kid out there in the 80s and 90s was in their backyard doing those jumpers, doing those layups, trying to
Right.
dunk to be like Mike.
Boy, you said that perfectly, John. Intentional impact and unintentional impact. And yeah, Captain Grice might have had an intentional impact. He might have been intending to do what he did. But on the other hand, he could have been recognizing that, as you say, everybody's watching him and the other firefighters. We're on public display. We're being watched all the time. People look up to us. And maybe he recognized the value of that in his role in the community to be a role model for young people. So yeah, that's tremendous. I think that's something we sometimes forget is the unintentional impact that we have, on other people. We need to really be remembering that as we walk out the door, go on that call, everything, especially today with everybody carrying these things, you're literally on camera all the time. So we're now able to see some of that impact more directly. That's tremendous. Good point.
So you had touched on change a little bit, the changing EMS landscape, things changing over the years, and I think we could talk about the only constant in life is change. Maybe the only thing that we hate more than the way things are right now is change, and that can be a little bit scary to things, especially when we look at. And I hate to say it, John said the ugly word earlier. COVID changed our world. If we go back to September 11th, that changed things. What would you say to those future leaders or today's leaders that about embracing change versus resisting change? You certainly see that in that legal landscape. What would be your advice?
Oh gosh, I mean, change is inevitable, as you said, Terence. So we gotta really be open-minded at all times, and we gotta be thinking about what can we do to make things better into the future. And we sort of have to have a future-focused mindset as leaders today. And we are in a period of monumental change in EMS, I think. The old adage that we're running lights and siren on, we're going on emergencies on every call. Hey, wait a minute. We're not just EMS, we're now mobile healthcare. The community, if anything that we should have learned from COVID is this, that of the total healthcare system, what element of the healthcare system was the most reliable to the public? Us. We were there 365, 24/7. EMS was out there in the public eye, in the streets, helping people get up out of bed, get into bed, whatever, and no one else was doing that. I mean, we were the most reliable aspect of the healthcare system. So that, I think, shifted a lot too and created people, a mindset in people that, hey, I could call EMS for anything maybe. And of course, that's a challenge because now we're dealing with less acute patients than we may have had in the past, back when we all started, okay? Now the numbers are what, 85% of the calls we go on don't require, ALS interventions or those life-saving skills, so to speak, but they do require one important life-saving skill, and that is caring for other people and having an attitude of gratitude and being empathetic and compassionate toward others. And I think that's an area we need to really focus on because I think, today's world, folks that come through EMT and paramedic school where they teach all those life-saving skills, but they don't teach you how to deal with other people or how to communicate with others as effectively as we should and need to. And of course, these things don't help when everybody's buried in their phone all day long. And we hear cases of, people in the back of an ambulance, a paramedic or EMT, not even paying attention to the patient, looking down at the phone, So we got a lot of work to do there, but I'm optimistic that, we can push forward and embrace some of these changes. Because if we don't change, that's going to create concern about long-term sustainability of our systems. And that's why we need to make some of the changes that we're going through now in terms of restructuring how EMS is delivered. Do we need to get an ambulance there for every single 911 request in less than 10 minutes? No, because most people don't need that time, within 10 minutes. So we got to adjust. We really do. And if we're going to sustain ourselves and thrive into the future.
There is no AI for caring, and that's the problem is
Love that.
everybody's
Yep.
wanting to use those devices to do that. And I'm not sure there's a lot of chapters that is dedicated inside of EMT or paramedic that talk about really caring and stuff. And unsolicited, maybe this could really be a foundational point of why there's a mental health issue amongst
Hmm.
emergency services, just because, maybe we were never taught how to care. Caring is something that just takes place or it doesn't take place. I either care about it or I don't. And when we've talked about on this series a lot about negative impact that we have coming up,
Hmm.
that we're taught, under a negative influence, usually motivated by negativity. So I could see where a lot of that stuff begins to tie in.
Hmm.
To your point of having to change system change, our agent, we have an agency here in North Carolina, Wake County, that is actually looking at doing those things now to where they're going to adjust maybe the response model based on the EMD criteria to further categorize what they're
Hmm.
going to get at a certain point. I don't know
Right.
all the details, but some degree it's going to be whether or not, or maybe when you get an ambulance. The question that I've got on the heels of all of that thing would be like, for a longest time, and then I'm going to speak specific to North Carolina, it was always a push of paramedic is the gold standard, paramedic is the
Hmm.
highest level. You ask EMTs, coming as a program director, I ask EMTs, why do you want to be a paramedic? It's the highest level. It's what I want to be.
Hmm.
With that being said, and now the some odd percentages of those calls being not necessarily needed for paramedic. When we talk about system change, do you believe that it should also consider the need of paramedics at all versus whether or not you're getting an ambulance and going? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's excellent point for discussion. Certainly, I think when I went to paramedic school, we had a lot of training and we did talk about things like caring and compassion and empathy, but we had the time. When I went through it, it was 2,200 hours. So we don't have that luxury these days. But I'll tell you, I'd rather have, absent some critical life-threatening, situation where you need to have a specific drug or whatever to save somebody's life. I'd rather have a caring and compassionate EMT than an uncaring and apathetic paramedic taking care of me. Okay. So, I think the focus is really on, taking care of the patient as a whole person and recognizing their needs. And the fact is that, we don't need a lot of those interventions. So I can see tiered systems where, certainly paramedics then are dispatched maybe in a non-transport unit to go to more of the critical calls, so to speak, because we are dealing with a paramedic shortage. And so, yeah, I can see a mix of that. I don't think, just because you're not a paramedic doesn't mean you can't impact and bring major improvement to somebody's life. And we see that time and time again where basic skills are really often, underappreciated, I guess, sometimes than the epitome of being a paramedic. All I want is a caring, compassionate person who's got the skills to get me to the hospital, the right location where I need to go if I'm having a crisis. Yeah.
So let's talk. We're going to the hospital, and I'm going to start to merge some themes together. John touched on Wake County. They're working on their initiative to reduce lights and sirens responses and transports.
Yes.
And I seem to recall the state of Pennsylvania a couple of years ago, the state medical director had set an initiative, and I'm going to make up the number, but I think it was a ballpark 1%. 1% of patient transports should be lights and sirens, and his belief was something along the lines of, "Hey, let's make sure we're doing right by our patients. What is safe,
Right.
reducing liability for agencies and for providers." And so as we start to kind of cross, hey, we've got some data supporting some things. And when we start to talk about the law, I've heard it referred to as the sword and the shield, and the law can be kind of intimidating to some folks. As a recovering paramedic yourself, now out there practicing law, sometimes that's scary to some folks. What advice would you give? What would be the words of wisdom to say, hey, you need to kind of dig in the law and have
Yeah,
that relationship with somebody ahead of time, especially with things like this, that law
right.
touches that clinical.
Well, I think you got to focus your efforts on what's going to have the most impact. And the number one risk in EMS is not the risk of getting sued for negligence. It's having a crash, killing somebody in your ambulance, going through a red light or excessive speed or whatever. Vehicle crashes are by far the number one area of risk. And you're talking about Dr. Doug Kupas from Pennsylvania, who's really led the way. He's the current president of NEMSP, and he's led the way to reducing, the use of red lights and sirens. And there's numerous studies that have come out in the last few years that show that saving a few minutes here and there because of red lights and sirens does not change the outcome of the patient. In fact, it could even be detrimental because of all the issues associated with the anxiety that can create for the patient. So, yeah, I think, using red lights and sirens in the right circumstance is appropriate, but by far we don't need them even in the response, but it's sort of ingrained in our DNA, Tell folks who are firefighter paramedics that hey, it's a 911 call. We're not going to run lights and sirens to the scene. They're going to say, what? So, but a lot of systems are starting to look at that because it does help to reduce risk tremendously. And the speed of a few minutes saved doesn't make a difference in the vast majority of patients. Now, there is a few exceptions to that. But here's our big challenge, gentlemen. Our big challenge is getting the public to understand this, because they've been ingrained in this concept that if I call 911, I'm going to have an ambulance in 10 minutes and lights and sirens. They'll even complain because the crew didn't use the lights and sirens on the way to the hospital because they didn't think their condition was serious enough. So we've got a lot of education to do. And of course, television and shows that we see, don't help with that, because every one of those shows that young people grow up in the public sees they're running lights and sirens, everything. So, that's a big area of education. We have to make sure the public understands what, the issues are and how, even though we may not run lights and sirens, it doesn't mean we're not taking good care of you, So lots of issues there for sure. And it's a challenge because, elected officials are public citizens who get elected to office. They think response time is the only standard to measure the effectiveness of an EMS system is response time. It's not true.
It's what
It's
we've told
a
them.
factor, but it's not the sole factor,
Yeah. And it's a little bit of what we've told them. And so that to that point, we just need to start telling them, we need to better educate, tell them a different story, tell them the story that we need them to hear, not necessarily one we want them to hear, so that we can at least adjust the message that's getting out there. And that's a hard thing to do because, when you get into who's using EMS, that's generational.
That's right. You're
And that's
exactly right.
So you're battling generations of people that have watched, rescue squads that merged and maybe became private, and maybe were with fire department and stuff, and maybe, or local government, whatever the case may be. And tradition is a hard thing to compete against.
That's for sure. What do they say? Years of tradition unimpeded by progress.
Right. Right. One personal question I had about you, I wanted to ask, just in regards to the leadership and management stuff. Can you think of a time in which you had to prepare for maybe a promotion, and maybe what you went through to get to that process? I guess if you got an EMS story, that's good. But I would think having to go through some things attorneys go through, there's a preparation that goes inside of that as well. But to help new, emerging leaders out there go through, what are some of the things someone successful as yourself you can remember, being either failing at or being successful at it and preparing for things?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I don't think it's one thing, because it's not like ace in the interview, because it's all about preparing for that step. And that's all about treating people with respect and dignity, doing more than what's expected of you, okay? Always be willing to help, always be willing to learn more than what the baseline is. Thirst for knowledge. I guess one of the things I've always done is I've been a perpetual learner, and I've been this is my third career basically. So, it's interesting, but I think it's all how you conduct yourself and helping others and truly valuing the other people you work with, the patients you care for, and everybody else, and that's recognizing, I think, that nobody has any job any more important than anyone else in life generally, and EMS in particular. So I don't know, I think that served me well, I think. And also I think taking some risk, when we were in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, to go to Erie, Pennsylvania was a big risk. Okay. People said to me, why are you going to do that? It's cold up there. Well, it's a great place. Okay. It's an opportunity. So some of it is also timing and luck, and recognizing when something is presented to you as a potential career opportunity to take advantage of it. Go for it, because we all are very comfortable in our own little worlds that we grow up in. And that has, then people will grumble later in life, oh, look at you, you did all this stuff. Yeah, well, maybe if you'd have taken some risk too, you could have been there. So I encourage people to take some risk too, and take those opportunities and sort of set a plan for where you want to be. What do you want to be in the next 10, 15, 20 years? I think that helps a little bit too. And having good mentors. I was blessed, literally blessed, to have 3 or 4 really good mentors in my career. People who influenced me, who stood for excellence. Terry Kemp, our program director; Earl Gettinger, my boss at Emergicare; Jim Page, dear friend Dr. Bob Porter, who was a consultant; Ray Fells. These are people, names that come up in my life who've took an interest in my life and career and said, hey, Steve, you could do this. Have you ever thought of this? So having good mentors, I think, is another aspect of it.
I feel like you were siding with John here for a second, or you're talking about it. It sounds very John Wilson-esque, where I talk about how I have one 25-year pen. John has 25 one-year pens, but I do hear a lot of benefit for, hey, getting outside of where you are and seeing things from a different perspective, or being in a new role. And that probably shifts for you, because almost like that 12 lead, if I were to say, hey, what is Steve Wirth's view for the future in EMS from if you were counseling that EMS director, that mid-level manager, if you had that couple of minutes, between sessions in a conference, what do you think the future for EMS looks like? We touched a little bit tiered response and some of those things, but what are your thoughts?
Wow, I'm very optimistic about the future. I think we're on the cusp of very positive change as we look to redesign systems to be more effective in our communities. So to me, I think EMS is a growth area, huge growth area, great opportunity to expand and grow in our services and in our own careers. But I think, a couple little tidbits. I think EMS leaders today need to listen more than they talk sometimes. I think we have to make sure as leaders we're connecting with the frontline folks, because they're the ones caring for the patients. We need to care for them better than we have. I think what's happened is, as leaders, we've all been caught up into these things. How many emails do you get a day? How many meetings do you go to that are a waste of time? How many, somebody asked me once, and this is a good way to put it, I think. Somebody challenged me after a conference and said to me, and I think they were a little disgruntled because their career path didn't take them maybe to where they wanted to be. And someone said to me, and I was much younger, said, so what is it that you did that really made a difference, as an EMS leader? And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm thinking, well, it wasn't, I couldn't think of any meeting I went to where I changed the world. I can't think of any email I wrote that made change. I can't think of any policies or procedures that I wrote or reviewed that really had an impact. But what did have an impact is when I would go out once a month on the trucks and wear a blue shirt like everybody else and carry 3x5 index cards. Do you all remember index cards?
Oh yeah.
We used to keep notes on them, you know. Now
Oh
you
yeah.
got a tablet to do that, which I have refused to do. But so, and I ride along with the crews, just ride along as a third person and not be there as a boss, but be there to listen and say, I just say, I'm here to listen to y'all and help. Tell me what you want me to do and I'll help you out. And that's all you needed to do. And I learned so much about the organization and the needs of the people, caring for the people, by just doing that. So that, to me, I think too many times leaders are now sucked up into the bureaucracy of leadership. There's a way to call it, way to say it. The bureaucracy of leadership is meetings, emails, text messages, policies, etc. It's all about your people, you know, and we need to do a better job taking care of them and checking in with them, you know, and making sure they're doing okay. Because look what they're struggling with. It ain't a big paying job, as we know. Some of our folks are working 2 or 3 jobs, you know, and it's having, we need to understand that better.
You have a lot of astronaut stuff behind you. Is that what you wanted to be when you grew up, an astronaut?
It kind of was. Neil Armstrong was kind of one of my original. I lived in Vero Beach, which was 50 miles south of Kennedy Space Center. So yes, I'm old enough to say that I actually saw a Saturn V rocket launched in the later end of the Apollo era when I was very young, and can actually remember when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. I was very young. But yeah, I guess that was kind of, you know, and that there's an example of people who were in the public view back then, especially in the 60s and 70s and early 80s. And, you know, kids looked up to them. And I think we have that opportunity to be the astronauts of the new generation here, and hopefully, you know, do things and show people that, my gosh, you know, what we're doing is extremely meaningful work. And what I like to say is, you know, inherently, the job of EMS is meaningful work. In other words, it's built into the job that it has value to society. A lot of jobs can't say that. You know, a lot of jobs, oh, you know, I may be pushing paper in an office somewhere. What impact am I going to have on other people's lives? Holy crap. I mean, we could change somebody's life literally in an instant by defibrillating them, or simply by being kind to them and holding their hand, you know, on the elderly lady who's in the back of your ambulance on the stretcher. You're taking her from the nursing home to the hospital. Nobody has talked to her in days, and she's talking to you about what she had for breakfast in great detail, and you're listening to her. Or she's talking about her great grandchildren, and you're listening to her. That has profound impact as well. So I can't really think of a job where you can have more of an immediate and positive impact on other people's lives as what we do. And I don't think we appreciate that enough, to be honest with you. I think we need to tell our folks that and remind them of that. Hey, wow, I know it's stressful. It's a lot of work. We're, you know, overworked and underpaid, and we got the paperwork to do. And yeah, people call us who don't need us. You know, from a medical standpoint, they have needs, but maybe it's not the needs we're thinking about. But yeah, it's a hugely positive job, and I think we need to remind people of that.
So, Steve, talking about a positive job as we start to wind down here, and this is a question that I like to ask every guest, is a lot of these things you're describing, somebody who's compassionate, having that positive mentor, that role model. That, to me, if I had to put one term on that sounds like a best friend. And so a best friend who's always there for you. And so I'm just curious, who's Steve Wirth's best friend?
Oh my good. Well, my wife Jill, who supports me tremendously,
She's an amazing.
and she keeps me in check and keeps me in line and reminds me of things that I, you know, or says, "Are you sure you want to do that?" You know, that's the key. You got to have people in life who are willing to say to you, "Hey, Steve, are you sure you want to do that?" Instead, we have a lot of people who will say, "Yeah, great idea, John. Great idea, Terence. You know, go ahead, go." You know, and they don't want to challenge you and make you rethink. And I think that's important in having, you know, mentors and other people who are your best friend. You want to be associated with positive people. That's the other thing. People who are, you know, looking forward, who see life in a positive way, who aren't just down on everything, because especially in our world, we need to be positive, especially in front of our people. Even on our conferences, when we do them, I say to all our folks, I said, okay, smiles, everybody, like Mr. Rourke. Remember Fantasy Island? There's an old show from the 1980s. That's what he said before the plane landed on the island, with the celebrity. Smiles, everybody, because it's all about, being positive and, in the bad times and the good times as well, So, especially under the stressful times, we got to say, we're going to get through this, everybody, that sort of thing. So, that's good point. Good question. Tough one. Jill's in the other room, so I had to make sure I said her. No, just kidding.
Well, I definitely appreciate you joining us on here. I think this is the first time I've ever had an attorney tell me, take risks.
Yeah, that's a good one. Most attorneys say, no, you can't do that. Most attorneys will tell you why you can't do something. Okay. Right. They'll come up with a legal reason not to do something. You're right about that, John. That's a very good point. Yeah, I think our firm has been a little different. We've always strived to help people come up with ways to do what they want to do and help them deal with the legal issues and all the other issues that go with it too. So we bring a kind of a pragmatic approach to it. So absolutely.
And if listeners did want to reach out to you, is there a way to contact your consulting firm or whatnot that you'd like to put out there?
Yeah, I think it's swirth at pwwemslaw.com or steve.wirth at pwwag.com. Those are the two email addresses that I use, or you could just Google me and find me, go to our website. And I always welcome questions. I don't always get to them quite right away, but I always look forward to people on the street or working as medics or EMTs calling me or reaching out to me. I'm always willing to give some time to help other people.
Cool. Well, Steve, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy life. Co-founder of the advisory group, partner in the law firm. Really, you guys do an amazing job. You and the entire group being positive. Whenever I bump into your folks at conferences, they've got those smiles. But we know that y'all have a lot on your plate, and we appreciate you taking time to help guide and to mentor the EMS leaders of tomorrow. So thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, John and Terence. It's been a privilege to be here with you guys, and you guys are fun to work with. I'd like to do this again. Yeah, you guys got it going, man. So thanks for everything you all do for EMS in your respective areas and for carrying the message out in this way. So thank you for having me.
And that's my take on point, Terry. Me and you, or you and I should say, we should smile more.
Yeah.